Greetings, Chodsters. Reformed Stoic. Back with a kind of a special video for you. A unique video. So I had a couple beers tonight. I actually went out, touched some concrete, tried to be social, and it was alright. It was a very neutral experience. More than anything, I just don't really want to drink. I tried drinking a couple of different times over the last couple of weeks, and I kind of decided, I really shouldn't drink, but I got out to where I was going tonight. I was like, you know what, you're gonna have to drink tonight for this to work. And it's got me feeling chatty. It's got me reminiscing. I saw some comments. They got filtered by YouTube, but I went ahead and put them through. Somebody found my channel recently and was like, man, I really vibe with what you're saying on your channel, except for the Gnostic schizo stuff. And he said theology-wise, he's more in line with EO, Eastern Orthodoxy. And I've been thinking, at some point you're going to have to try to kind of clarify where you're at spiritually. And we've had a few different check-ins on this channel, but I think it's time, guys, for just a great big, where have we been? Where did we go? Where are we now? So I don't think anybody is here from these times. I actually had videos on my first channel, and I've had 3 different Reformed Stoic channels. There's this one, which this was actually a random channel that I had a cat video on, because I was thinking hey, maybe I can get famous for having cats, because some people just film cute cat videos and get famous. That didn't work out for me. My cat video had 10 views. So this was actually a backup channel that ended up becoming my main. Then I have Reformed Stoic 2 backup, which that used to be the Rally channel that has my rap music video on it. And then there is the original Reformed Stoic channel, which ended up getting 3 strikes and was supposed to get deleted. But I randomly tried to undo the last strike a year and a half after that happened. They're like, oh, okay, yeah, misunderstanding. So that channel was vomited out of the vortex back into existence. And that channel used to be called Perennial Stoic. People who email me, I still have the same email address, perennialstoic@gmail.com. Before I became the Reformed Stoic, I was the Perennial Stoic. I was, at that time, when I made the first couple of videos on that channel that ended up getting privated, before I started to make the kind of black pill content, I was reading Rein Guinan, Reign of Quantity by Rein Guinan. Maybe it's pronounced Rene Guinan. I was reading Julius Evola, Revolt Against the Modern World. I also read Frigith Shuon. Those are kind of your 3 main perennial philosophers. Frigith Shuon, Rein Guinan, and Julius Evola. I feel like a lot of people from maybe Fortunes know who Julius Evola is. He was heavily inspired by Rein Guinan. Frigith Shuon is kind of out there. Nothing I read from him really stuck, but I read one of his books. I think it was called something Metaphysics. I don't remember. But that's the kind of stuff I was reading around that time. The perennial philosophy. I had been into a smorgasbord of occultism. I speak on that. I've spoken on that in the past, in my Catholic times, in my Christian times, as a kind of a shameful thing. Whoa, you were into the occult, and you tried to use Solomonic, the lesser key of Solomon, to do black magic and hurt people, and you tried to talk to demons, and whoa, that's a huge deal. And you know, now it's more like it's just kind of weird and larpy. But no, I had some experiences during those times. But that started to go to a more like philosophical place, and there was a point where I identified as a Neoplatonist and a Gnostic. But what happened was I discovered the channel Mysterium Fasces, and I found it on 4chan. And I was listening to these guys, I'm like, you know what? These guys are Christians, theologians. I had never really heard that term, theologian, before. I mean, I'd heard it in passing, but I'd never really thought about, like, what is a theologian? Somebody who seriously reads the Bible. And they were talking about the perennial philosophers. They had mentioned that they read Guénon, Schuon, and Julius Evola. They recommended the Metaphysics of War from Julius Evola. And I was like, okay, here's some guys. These guys are Christians. They know philosophy. They've read a lot of the same stuff that I've read, but I haven't ever really, like, taken the Bible seriously. And, you know, there's all kinds of, like, smorgasbord, edgelord occultists who are like, oh, you know, I really like the wisdom of the Psalms and the Proverbs. And, like, oh, Jesus actually meant this when he was saying this, man. So you'll probably, like, read through some different sections of the Bible as an occultist. But I had realized that, you know, I had been dragged around through so much shit in the occult. So why not Jesus? Why not God? Why not the Bible? I mean, it's gotten to a point where I believe you could, like, become a phantom and survive death in the afterlife, like vampiring off of people or some shit. So I believe obscure things. So why not the Bible? And I had this time, I'll never forget this, 2017, leading up to my first semester. It was the summer before my first semester at UNLV. I was playing StarCraft on my laptop, listening to Mysterium Fasces, and I was thinking, man, like, so what it comes down to is Yahweh God, or is Yahweh the demiurge? Is Yahweh the one powerful, most high God, or is Yahweh the demiurge? And I was just kind of casually thinking about that while I'm playing StarCraft. Like, I don't know, he kind of seems like a wrathful monster, but maybe he's just the most powerful thing that there is, and maybe that's like, oh, fuck you, Zerglings, and I was just kind of thinking about that, and I had a moment. It was interesting because I wasn't smoking weed when I first went to UNLV, and what happened is it was the midterms. It was like a take-home online midterm test that I was taking for it was like a politics kind of history class. And what happened was my internet screwed up and the page refreshed and it turned in my test with how much I had done. And I had only done about half, and it gave me a 56, and I got an F on my midterm because of that. And I freaked the flip out, and I had a full-on panic attack. So I went to the dispensary in Vegas and went and bought some weed. And it ended up not being a big deal. I told my teacher, and he let me retake it. But I had been off weed for maybe like 4 or 5 months. I don't even remember at this point, but I had been off weed for a while. And it's just so fascinating how it works with weed, because that was it. Then I was back on weed for the rest of the time, and I was kind of thinking, oh, it's good that I'm off weed, because now maybe that will help me socially at college. But so I was back on weed again, but I bring that up because the kind of weird occult shit I was doing at the time was like, okay, well, I'm part Irish and Norwegian and Anglo, so let's take Irish Celtic gods. I don't even remember the names of any of them. That's kind of like one of the more obscure ones. Everybody knows like Shiva, Shakti, Vishnu. Everybody knows like the Hindu gods. Everybody knows like Odin, Tyr, Thor from like the Norse paganism. Everybody knows like the Roman, Greek pantheon. In Roman, it's named after the planets. In Greek, it's like Zeus, Hades, Poseidon. Everybody pretty much knows about that stuff. But the Celtic paganism is a lot more rare. So I had like Celtic pagan gods printed out, hung up on my wall, and I had Norse pagan gods. So I was just doing this like ancestral paganism where it's like, these are the Mastronk pagan gods. And I also had a picture of the Gnostic supposed god beyond god, Abraxas. And I also had a printout of Lucifer. And I'll just fast forward really quick to my current commentary on Lucifer. He's not really talked about much in the Bible. He's alluded to maybe like a couple of different times. So kind of my take right now, when people are like, oh, are you a Luciferian? I mean, I think people have really kind of projected a lot of fiction onto what Lucifer is. And I'm not apologizing for Lucifer as a Luciferian. I'm not. I don't consider myself a Luciferian. And we're going to get to where I'm at and what I think I believe. But just kind of like some commentary on what I think about Lucifer. He was the archangel and he fell from heaven. And there's even some speculation. It's like, well, Satan just means adversary. Satan means adversary, the evil one. What's the name of like because there's the demon in the pit that's actually not Lucifer. It has some sort of a specific name. It's like right on the top of my head. I want to say Belphegor, but that's not it. That's like some other random demon. Anyway, there's some specific demon of the pit, of the underworld, that's not Lucifer, and it's not Satan, and I can't remember what it is. But when you get into like the demonology of the Bible, there's some kind of room for speculation. Well, Satan means adversary. The Bible mentions the evil one many times. I think there's some room for an argument that Lucifer isn't necessarily the adversary, but I don't know. And that's a lot of what this video is going to get towards, is I don't know. But anyway, I had a picture of Lucifer. There was actually a chant on YouTube. E nomane de Lucifere, e noma regitas. There was a Luciferian chant on YouTube that had gotten like 20,000 views. I made that. I made that shit. E nomane de Lucifere. I made that like way back in 2017, bro, and it was actually blowing up on YouTube on some obscure channel I had that had some other weird esoteric occult experimental music I was making. And I nuked that shit. And before I nuked that shit, I tore down all those pictures. I was high. It was one of the first times I had gotten high. It might have even been the first time I got high. Like after I picked up that weed from taking that test, I looked around at all those pictures that I had on the walls. I was like, you know what? This ain't it. I don't know what I believe, but this ain't it. And I ripped down all the pagan bullshit that I had all over my walls. That was somewhat near the end of 2017. So, shortly after finding Mysterium Fasces, I found Jay Dyer. And shortly after finding Jay Dyer, I found Southern Israelite. Southern Israelite had a debate with Florian Geyer of Mysterium Fasces. And the first time I watched through the debate, I was like, oh, this guy, he doesn't understand like the transcendence of God. He's like taking things too literally. He's taking it to this extreme where the earth is flat and God has a physical presence, and he denies the Trinity, and he doesn't understand. And then I listened to that debate again, and I was like, man, this guy, Southern Israelite, has a very interesting, peculiar worldview. So I started watching his channel, and I started watching his videos, and I popped up in his chat, and then I eventually changed my name to the Reformed Stoic, and he took note of that, and I was a regular in his chat for a while, and eventually he invited me into his Discord. And I guess you could say the rest is history. You know, he had his little reading list of books, and I read through a good portion of them. Some I still plan on reading, like Vladimir Lossky's Vision of God. But his view, I felt like I was very receptive to, because it was the polar opposite of these views that I was aware of in the occult. I had studied Neoplatonism. I had studied Gnosticism. And he was saying, you know, the religion of Christianity has carried over these pagan ideas. Some of them, he said, being from like Pythagoreanism, like the idea of the soul. You can read these pagan occult stories about the soul projecting from the body and traveling into the underworld. So the concept of the soul isn't really from the Bible. It's carried over from Platonism, Neoplatonism, Pythagoreanism. And I was already aware that there was a tradition of like, you know, like Plato's Timaeus is kind of like a continuation of Pythagoreanism. It's like this Pythagorean tradition handed down to Plato, and then that tradition handed down to Plotinus. So the whole thing with Southern Israelite is like, the soul is a pagan idea, the Trinity is wrong, Jesus is just the Jewish Messiah. And I asked him at one point, it's like, you know, it really just seems kind of like you're a Jehovah's Witness. And he's like, oh, you know, the Jehovah's Witnesses still accept the paganism in the New Testament, which is kind of like, yeah. He's basically a Jehovah's Witness, brah. Like, pretty much. Maybe he's tried to obscure himself in a couple of different ways. But, so, you know, I was into that for a while. And then it made it very clear. It's like, wow, there's these two views. There's like the scientific, occult, Pythagorean, Platonic, Neoplatonic view, which goes through like all kinds of occultism. A lot of physics comes from that, like low-key physics, dark matter, black holes, wormholes. It kind of comes from the occult. Space has origins from what's his name, who was into Thelema, which is Aleister Crowley's occult. I had done all kinds of studies on Aleister Crowley. I had known all this specific information about the occult to where it's like, wow, with Southern Israelites information, there's two sides. There's the Bible is literally true, young earth creationism, flat earth, fake space, and then occult scientism. These are the two views. And then it's like, okay, so the elite is like occult scientism, and then the good guys, like the struggle is the people who understand that the Bible is literally true, and that, you know, Yahweh is God, and Jesus is actually the Messiah, and, you know, the Catholic Church had the wrong theology, and they turned Christ into God, and they created a new religion. I was just in a place where that was able to just take over my mind. And I'm not going to get into the whole drama with Southern Israelite. Obviously, I've tried to like not mention him on my channel that much for a while. But we're just really hashing out the entire story. Okay, we're about to hit the 20-minute mark. I'm going to try to wrap it up in the next 10 minutes. I got some beans cooking. I'm going to eat a freaking bean burrito at 3 in the morning because I had to speed soak the beans for an hour and then cook them for an hour and a half. So from there, that's about the IP2 times. That's when Rick Perry kind of slipped into my influence. So me and Rick Perry are talking about stuff. And he very subtly, see, he thinks he's really clever. And, you know, for the record, I consider that Rick Perry died. I consider that Rick Perry was murdered and replaced with some weird infiltrator because he created a new Instagram. And he's like, oh, I can't log into my old Instagram. Why? Why can't you log in your old Instagram? And, you know, it's very likely it's just been the same Rick Perry the whole time, and he's some sort of a weird MI5 intelligence infiltrator, LARPer, traitor. But I had some good discussions with Rick Perry in the past, and I thought he was a cool dude. And, you know, sometimes I like to think, yeah, you know what? He was a real one, and he got murdered. That's why he had to create the new Instagram. But here's the slick thing that Rick Perry did. He thinks he's really slick, turning me into a Catholic. I just let it happen. I noticed what was happening. First, he's like, oh, yeah, you know, like the Protestant Reformation was heckin' based. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing. Keep in mind, I'm a little bit buzzed right now. He very just slowly started saying things like, well, you know, the Catholic Church has penal substitution, which is different than orthodoxy, and, you know, the penal substitution is really like the defining view of what's important, you know, that Christ died for our sins, and that's what's really important in Protestantism. And the thing about Protestantism is, like, they've just tried to differentiate themselves from the Catholic Church. Kind of like how I said what Southern Israelite did with Jehovah's Witnesses. Like, he's basically a Jehovah's Witness, but he's like, oh, well, you know, they still believe in the paganism in the New Testament. He's just kind of trying to differentiate himself so he can have his own thing. And that's what Rick Perry said that, like, Protestants were doing. Because, you know, Catholics also believe in penal substitution. And then when it comes to, like, you know, what about praying the rosary? It's like, oh, well, you're just venerating Mary. It's not a big deal to venerate the saints. It's a straw man to say that you're worshiping Mary or praying to Mary. You're not. You're asking her to pray for you. So, poof, there goes the stuff about Mary. And then salvation by faith is like, well, honestly, like, faith without works, according to James, is dead works, which Southern Israelite tried to continue. He denies James. He denies James and Jude and 2 Peter to try to make it more consistent. It's like, no, there's no works. There's salvation by faith only. But I definitely don't think his view is salvation by faith only. So he's kind of all over the place. And I think it got to a point where my studying just got too rigorous to where I was able to, like, stay in his limited hangout. Cult. But yeah, eventually Rick Perry, over the course of months, it's like, oh, you know, like, Protestantism is just like a forced meme rebellion, and I'm always going to stay with the Latin rite of the Catholic Church. And I'm like, oh, so you're a Catholic, and oh, you think I should be a Catholic? And oh, okay, well, because, you know, I went from being, like, supposedly a Protestant, like a messianic Calvinist. I mean, the old school Protestants would have you burned at the stake for denying the Trinity. So, yeah. It's basically he's a Jehovah's Witness. Jehovah's Witnesses are not Protestants. But I was getting to a point where it's like, well, I just want to go to a normal church. So this is around the time I get to Kodiak. And I start telling people on my channel, you know what? Go to a normal church. It doesn't even really matter. You're just going to a church. But I was probably pointing people toward, like, some sort of a Baptist or Calvinist or Protestant church. I was saying, just go to a normal church, bro. Like, get off the internet. Get off of the internet Christianity. I'm going to a church, and so should you. So I was going to a Baptist church, I guess, for like a year and a half, and I got COVID 2022 around April, and that was crazy, man. I thought I was going to die. My COVID experience was absolutely insane. I was really sick for like 3 weeks. I was playing on the worship team, and everything just felt very exhausting. It's like, hey, you get to go to the Wednesday luncheon. Oh, we got rehearsal on Friday, and then we show up and do rehearsal. We would show up on Sunday morning before church, and do a rehearsal with the worship team, and then go back an hour later and then perform at church, which, you know, as somebody who moved on to become a Catholic, it's like, yeah, you know, performing at church. Oh, okay, guys, well, it's time for the rock concert. And I think it's great. And, you know, way back being a drummer, I did Guitar Center drum off, and I got second place in Boston in 2012. Some accolades to my drumming skills. But the guy who beat me, very clearly beat me, he was a black gospel drummer. Going to Berklee College of Music, I've known for a long time about gospel drummers, gospel music, a lot of talented gospel musicians. So I'm at a point where it's like, I like the traditional church. I like Mass and the Orthodox liturgy or Mass, whatever. But I don't have a problem with like worship teams and the Protestant. Like Baked Alaska said, laser shows and rock concerts. When I talked to him about it, he's like, you know, I just like the feel of the Catholic Church. I don't really like the laser lights, the laser light shows and rock concerts. I like the laser light shows and rock concerts, but I personally at this point prefer the traditional church vibe for the aesthetics. Basically just like what Baked Alaska said. So what I was getting at, and I was also volunteering. I was volunteering with some like group there, going to these luncheons. I went to some thing where there was like a presentation, and they revealed that they were like Zionists, and we'll just move on from that. But it was exhausting. I felt like people were judging me. I wasn't fitting in. Somebody was like, oh, you know, my son used to talk about you because he plays drums and you play drums. He's a marine biologist now. So I hear you working for your parents. It was like, cool. Like I was getting some kind of fake vibes. Like the stereotype I get of like Baptist churches is like, hey, how's it going? I hear you're working for your parents and you're, oh, so you were a musician. Do you ever miss it? Like, just big smile, like, kind of giving you shit about how your life is going nowhere. That's kind of my interpretation of the stereotype of the Baptist church. And then the Catholic church is just like the most judgmental face you could ever possibly think of. Like everybody in Catholic church thinks you're going to hell. So I moved on, went to the Catholic church. I did RCIA with the priest there. That was interesting because I was dealing with gang stalking while we were going on our walks while I was receiving RCIA. I think the priest might have been in on it, but I'm sure people are going to give me shit for saying that. That's the first time I fucking said that, by the way. Like, I think the priest might have been in on the gang stalking. Anyway, that took quite a while. I feel like that took longer than RCIA was supposed to take, but I enjoyed it. Me and the priest had great discussions. He told me that I had a knack for theology, and he seemed to respect me until somebody called the Catholic Church, and he's like, I just got a call from you. There's a message on our machine, and you sounded very distressed. It's like, yeah, that wasn't me. There's people who harass me, and he's like, oh, well, maybe you're mentally ill. It's like, well, you said you got a message from me, right? That wasn't me. Somebody's pretending to be me. And my relationship with him changed immediately from that moment on. I started to get a very kind of like fake vibe from the church. It's like, man, everybody here just seems judgmental as shit. There's people gossiping about me. There's people glaring at me. There was a time when like two big, huge military guys were wearing their military uniforms during Mass, and they followed me and my mom to her car. I'm like, wow. I mean, look, forget about the fact that I think those people were there to harass me. It's like, wearing your military uniforms to Mass? Like, I just did a lot of observing of how things were going at that church. There's only one Catholic church in Kodiak, Alaska. It's freaking St. Mary's Church. I went there as a child. I went there as a child. You know, my mom kind of tried to raise me Catholic, even though I went to Bible camp. I went to a Baptist Bible camp. And what my mom told me growing up is like, you know, it's kind of like your first name of your faith is Christian and our last name is Catholic. Or like your first name is Catholic and your last name is Christian. And I remember like telling some kids at Bible camp that I was a Catholic. It's like, my mom says that Catholics drink blood and worship Mary. And I was like, I don't know. I'm fucking 7 years old. That's what my mom told me. And my mom says that's bullshit. It's like my mom, bless her heart, isn't really a theologian. So that's all that really needs to be said about the Kodiak stuff. I did RCIA. I did the first 5 months devotional to the Sacred Heart of the Virgin Mary, which comes from the miracle of Fatima. Supposedly, the apparition of Mary at Fatima told these kids, go to Mass, confess every first Saturday of the month for 5 consecutive months, pray the rosary every day during that time, and then on that first Saturday, after you confess and take the Eucharist, do that day's rosary, and then do an extra 15 minutes of meditation on the mysteries. And I feel like it's kind of like a cheat code. It's like this cheat code where if at any point, you know, during that time you don't do the rosary for a day, or you don't make it to confession, or you don't take the Eucharist on that first Saturday, because the condition of it, like being super rigid with it to complete the cheat code, anybody who's tried to do cheat codes, if you do anything wrong, it doesn't work. You have to pray the rosary every single day for 5 months straight. I did that. On that first Saturday, you have to go to confession, you have to take the Eucharist, and you have to do that extra 15 minutes meditation on the rosary. I did all of that. I completed the 5 months devotional to the Sacred Heart of the Virgin Mary. If you read my manifesto, the subversive gospel of the real God, or whatever it's called, I recommend that people do that. Like, no matter what you believe. I consider it like an initiation into just the mystery of faith. And they say that during Mass. The mystery of faith. There's like a part in the Mass where he says that. But whatever you believe, whoever you are, even if you want to be like a Baptist or whatever you go on to believe as some sort of a Christ-centered faith, I believe that everyone should get confirmed into the Catholic Church, do RCIA, and do the first 5 months devotional to the Sacred Heart of Mary. I just think it's great. And if you're going to stay a Catholic, you know, maybe be a little more loosey-goosey with the confessions, because you probably aren't doing like mortal sins. For my definition of a mortal sin, you have to do something like really bad. Like when I said something fucked up about my dad, it's like, okay, that's probably a mortal sin. But masturbation's not a mortal sin. But yeah, like for whatever my system is, like I think everybody should do that. And what you're supposed to get is that Mary is going to help you in the salvation process when you die, if you go through that. That's supposedly what she told the kids. So that's the whole thing. And when I moved to where I am now, I went to Mass once, and I never went back. And it just kind of started falling apart, you know, because I had been wrestling with the stuff about hell. So to understand where I'm at now, because that's the point of the video, I got to a point where it's just like, intuitively, I just don't really believe in eternal conscious torment. And then people are like, oh, that's your feelings, and the Bible's not about your feelings, and here's what it says in the Bible, like, do not be misled by your heart, like, don't follow your heart, follow God. And it was just the beginning of me questioning. It was just the beginning of me like, yeah, but what if, like, not every book of the Old Testament is accurate? Or what if, like, we don't know this? Or Or what if like the whole Old Testament is made up, and it was made up by Jews to be like, where the hell are you guys from? You popped out of nowhere in the middle of the desert and you want all this respect and authority. Oh, this is us. This is us, and we're chosen by God. So yeah, we're just gonna march in here. And I mean, what if Jews just made it up to just say, like, this is our God, like, yeah, this is the one true God. And it was really funny when I asked Grok. It's like, so Grok, like, what have Jews like done for the world? Like, what have they done? Like, why should we be grateful to them? Well, they gave us Christianity and Islam and Judaism. It's like, that's it. That's the whole thing. I'm looking for some specific thing, and then I asked, was there a lot of converts before Christianity? Like, how was there a large number of Jewish converts? Like, did Jews do what's the word? Soul winning? Like, what? Dude, I'm totally brain farting. When you go out and you try to save souls and convert people, I'm totally brain farting in what that term is. But like, did the Jews evangelize? Like, did the Jews try to get converts? And Grok's like, no. It was very, very rare. There's a very small number of converts to Judaism in the Old Testament. And so Judaism in the Old Testament was like basically like an elite club. They were not trying to convince other people to become Jewish. Like, they would talk about their God, and sometimes people would be like, oh, wow, like, your God is amazing. It's like, yep, that's nice. Like, you're not invited. Judaism was very tribal and very, like, it's just all for us. And then, looking at Jesus as the Messiah / God in the flesh, Jesus came to invite everybody to become a part of the faith, with the Jewish God, Yahweh. And then Jews are like, wait a second, like, this isn't what our Messiah is supposed to do. Our Messiah is supposed to gather us all in Israel, which he didn't. After Christ, the Jews scattered. He's supposed to rebuild the temple, which he showed up and predicted the destruction of the temple. And there was one more, and I'm brain farting on that too. This is pretty hefty stuff for me, 2 beers deep, after a night of whatever the hell it is I did tonight. So Jews say that, like, this is not our Messiah, and Jews are very, very, very confident of that. Now, obviously, there's been a lot of Jewish converts to Christianity over the millenniums, but so here I am now. What does it do? I believe, like, how did I've described the process of, like, being in this, like, what Jay Dyer calls, like, a trailer park cult, basically a Jehovah's Witness, to becoming, like, just kind of a smorgasbord. Like, I think I'm some sort of a Protestant. Like, I had a phase where I was thinking I was just kind of like a regular Calvinist. By the way, I asked Grok what he thought was the most solid theology. He thinks it's Calvinism. He was very respectful about it, but he's like, Calvinism, but it's just like hyper mechanical, autistic, to where probably Grok's arguably the worst is, like, the Catholics and Orthodox go on tradition, but the tradition doesn't really seem biblical. So Calvinists win, but they're, like, super, like, rigid and mechanical. The Presbyterians, or no, what's the word? The Pentecostal. That's not it. It's not the Presbyterians. It's not the Pentecostals. The Anglicans. The Anglicans, basically. The Episcopal, Anglican. That's kind of like a good, trying to have like a balance between the scripture and tradition. But anyway, I had a phase where I was probably more of like a pure Calvinist. But then I became very serious about Catholicism. And I was like, well, am I set of a contest? Or like, what do I think about Pope Francis? Well, it's like, oh, well, I think that Pope Francis is heretical, but he's really the Pope, and he's teaching, ex cathedra, so it's okay, and it all checks out. And like, no, I'm a regular Catholic, or maybe I'm a sedevacantist, and maybe Vatican Catholic is right about everything, or maybe I'm actually like a little bit more of like low key a liberal Catholic, but kind of like balanced. Like, I like these things from traditionalism, I like these things from liberalism, so kind of just like all over the place, trying to figure out where I was within the Catholic Church. I read that book by, what's his face, who wrote that book? Jesuit John Courtney Murray, Time Life, CIA, how the CIA's doctrinal warfare program changed the Catholic Church, about Vatican II, and then there's these Catholic YouTubers like, well, actually, let's actually read some of the stuff in Vatican II, and it's really not that big of a deal. So I'm aware of all these different views within the Catholic Church, and then of course there's orthodoxy. I like what the priest in Kodiak said. He's like, honestly, if an Orthodox bro comes to Mass, he can take the Eucharist. Or Orthodox Christians can take the Eucharist at a Catholic church. Orthodoxy, Catholicism are basically like very, very, very close. It tends to be the Orthodox who have more of a negative view of the Catholic Church than vice versa. But somebody like Vatican Catholic, he thinks just absolutely everybody's going to hell. And he doesn't even really make it really clear like how to not go to hell. It's like, okay, well, you're a sedevacantist, so none of the churches are good enough. Like, how do I even get saved? Because the rad trad lad Catholics is like, good luck not burning in hell and getting tortured by demons for all fucking eternity, dude. Like, that's probably what's gonna happen. A lot of people like beat their chest for rad trad, but it's like, you realize like you're probably going to hell, right? It's like most people are going to hell according to that view. So we want to start landing this plane because I could spend another freaking half an hour just talking about all the various views within Catholicism. But somehow for me, it's just like, an all-loving God. Like, God loves everybody and he wants everybody to get saved, but it's so sad. I love you so much, but you have to get tortured for all eternity, bro. It's just eternal punishment for finite crime. And this is something I really wanted to say in this video. The concept of you have to believe this or you burn in hell for all eternity, it reminds me of the ontological existence. The ontological argument for God's existence. And it goes like this. If something that could exist or not exist were to exist, it would be better than if it didn't exist. Therefore, God has to exist, because if he didn't exist, then he wouldn't be as good as if he did exist. And God is the greatest good. Obviously that was sloppy, but that's the gist of it. Say that to an atheist, and they're going to be like, bro, what the fuck what? Like, when you say that shit with a smug face, like, oh, get ready for this one, atheists. Like, if something's greater, if it existed, than if it didn't exist, then God has to exist because God is the greatest good, and God can't be greater than good, and so he has to exist. It's like, you really think that's convincing? I think that's a terrible argument. It's like wordplay. It's like weird wordplay. It's not the strongest argument for God's existence at all. My favorite has always been and will always be the teleological argument. If the world appears to have an intelligent design, that implies an intelligent creator. The world does appear to have an intelligent design, therefore it implies an intelligent creator. Again, sloppy, but pretty close. That's the gist of it. Let's not be pedants about it, okay? So that's my favorite. But yeah, this is like, oh, you have to believe this book you have to believe all of this or you get tortured for all eternity. It's like, well, I definitely don't want to get tortured for all eternity, so I guess I will believe in your religion even though there's room for doubt. And it just gets to this point where people are afraid to question because of this threat of eternal torment. And then now I'm back in the pool with atheists and all kinds of other people. But yeah, it reminds me of the ontological argument for God's existence, where it's like, man, that's a really good way to get people to believe your lie. Now, does that mean I'm an atheist? No. All of the problems I have are with the Old Testament, and I already knew a good amount about Gnosticism, but, I'm a way better student now. I'm a way better intellect and a student now than I was as an occultist. I was all over the place as an occultist. Sometimes I would come across people who were more serious occultists, and they would dunk on me and be like, yeah, you have no idea what you're talking about, dude. But now I'm just a better student, so whatever it is I'm trying to learn about now, now I can learn about the real shit. I know a lot more about Gnosticism now than I did before. And this is the big grand finale of the video, where it's just like, all I know is that everything in the world points toward Jesus. Jesus is just the center of everything. That's where the new calendar started. Sometimes atheists would be like, everything Jesus taught just seems like common sense. Well, it didn't before he taught it. It became seemingly the stereotype of common sense because those are the great standards of what it means to be good. If you try to ask someone, give me just kind of like a general stereotype of what you think it means to be good, well, just be nice to people, be good to people, try not to be judgmental. And a lot of people don't know what it means to be good. See, a lot of the latest stuff on my channel is like, we're surrounded by narcissists, and so many people are topsy-turvy, and they don't even know what it means to be good. Jesus is the foundation. Jesus is the great balance, and we've definitely lost it. And so many people think they know what it means to be good, but they don't. And for me, it's just like, and when I read the Gospels, when I listen to Jesus speak, it's like, he's not just the most intelligent. His arguments against the Pharisees, they're not just logical, they're not just clever, they're not just intelligent. It is that, but it's beyond. And I feel like the Pharisees' reactions to Christ, it's like, we can't beat this guy, but I just want him dead. And it's so similar to like the narcissist smear campaign and the narcissist stalking, and like the way that a narcissist is jealous of someone and then just wants them to be destroyed. That is like exactly the relationship between the Pharisees and Jesus. But they were the supposed holy figures of the time, and Jesus just amassed this great audience and followers, and he showed up, and he was not afraid to debate the Pharisees, and he overturned the money tables and the temples and said, you're making a mockery of God's house. You've turned my Father's house into a den of thieves. So what's undeniable for me is that Jesus will forever and always be a center part of my life. And I'm in some Gnostic groups on Facebook, and it's all over the place, dude. What I've found through these years studying theology heavily from about 2018 till we'll say like a year ago, like six or seven heavy years of studying theology, that foundation to whatever belief that I'm going to find is absolutely just game changer. These people in these Gnostic groups are like, oh, Jesus actually never said he was God, and Jesus was actually here to like teach us that we're God. It's like these people have no fucking idea what they're talking about. Like, for most people, for most Gnostics, it's an excuse to just believe stupid New Age hippy-dippy surface horseshit. Those groups are just absolutely all over the place. Now, I've come across a couple of pretty intelligent Gnostics, really Marcionism, because Marcion had his evangelic on Bible, which was basically just the Gospel of Luke and then the rest of the New Testament, denying the Old Testament, denying Yahweh. So Marcionism is not the same thing as Gnosticism. At this point, I've written my own work with the help of Grok AI. I guess I can go ahead and post that again in the description if anybody's interested in reading that. Now, I've said before when I made the video about it, is that what I believe? I'm not this, like, kind of theologian guy anymore. I mean, I've studied theology, but at this point, I'm just more of a spiritual philosopher, to where it's like, I still pray the rosary every day. I have a beautiful Catholic altar in my living room. I've actually started making holy water, which, you know, Catholics and Orthodox will be like, oh, cringe, but I bless myself with holy water. I sprinkle holy water that I McDonald's Jr. holy water that I make. Priest Stoic, let's sketty with the holy water. I have my own form of spirituality. I feel like the New Testament is better than the Old Testament by a lot. I maintain that, other than the fact that Catholics and Orthodox think you have to go to Mass, other than that, in practice, I believe the theology that I believe, other than that you have to go to Mass, is like the same as Orthodox and Catholics. It's really crazy how it works. It's just like low key, I feel like maybe Yahweh is some sort of a demiurge, ancient alien monster that isn't really God. And I don't know if I believe that. I would like to think that it doesn't matter. And of course people would be like, well, of course it matters, but, well, what about it as a Protestant who believes in salvation by faith alone? I have faith in Jesus Christ. I've accepted Jesus Christ into my heart as my Lord and Savior. I believe, and then, you know, when it comes to, I believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, and Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, who was conceived of the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and was buried. He ascended into hell. 3 days later, he rose again from the dead. He ascended into heaven, sitting at the right hand of God, the Father Almighty. From thence he shall come again to judge the living and the dead. Believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints, forgiveness of sins, resurrection of the body, and life everlasting. I say that every single day at the beginning of the rosary. And it's like, do I believe all of that? I believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. So what if you're a Gnostic? Well, Jesus talks about his Father. Jesus has a Father. He never specified that it was Yahweh. And you can point at all these things, and it's like, well, this kind of points, like, you know, he's referencing the Old Testament, he's referencing the law, he's doing this, and, you know, I'm not going to start getting into all this other stuff about that, because this video is almost an hour now. But all I'm saying, bottom line, maybe it seems like he's talking about Yahweh because of the fact that he was referencing the Old Testament and whatnot, but he was speaking to a Jewish audience. And then you can consider the fact that, you know, maybe the living God just happened to be born in a Jewish family. I understand that this isn't going to be convincing to people, but the bottom line is he never specified that his father is Yahweh. What he did specify is that he does have a father. So I believe in God, the Father Almighty. Yes. Whoever that is, yes. Creator of heaven and earth. Well, the Gnostics think that, you know, there's a demiurge who created Earth. But that's kind of like some sci-fi shit, you know? It's just, maybe, maybe not. Like, and then it's like, what? But it's really important that you believe everything that the Old Testament says. Well, guess what? Back to the fact that I believe what Catholics believe. You know what Vatican II says about the Old Testament, right? Vatican II says that you can believe whatever you want about the Old Testament. Vatican II says you can believe whatever you want about the Old Testament. Oh, okay, well, I think Yahweh is a spaghetti demiurge alien monster. Wait a second. Well, it says. It says right there. It's like I'm taking the rules. Look, I accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, and I subscribe to Vatican II, and it's like, bro, but I know, but you're not supposed to. Like, I'm following the rules, bro. I'm following the rules. What I believe about the Old Testament was that it was made up by Jews so they could, make everybody think they're special. I don't know what I believe about the Old Testament. I believe that the New Testament seems like a very holy, intelligent, otherworldly figure who amassed a following because he was amazing and he had the most brilliant teachings of all time. The Old Testament is a fanatical story about staffs becoming snakes and floods flooding the entire world because God loves us so much that he fucking murdered everybody in cold blood. Gnostics are always talking about how mean God was. I can tell you what, an atheist too. I used to say atheists bounce back and forth between being Gnostics and atheists. The one they always seem to miss is in Numbers. When Yahweh murdered 20,000 Jews for complaining a little bit. Moses punched a rock. So he was condemned to die miserable in the desert. I mean, so Old Testament is like God being very mean and miraculous things happening. And then, then I asked Grok. It's like, okay, so throughout the entire Old Testament, what did the Jews do for the world? They protected their religion and they led to other religions like Christianity and Islam. And I'm like, that's it, huh? Okay. I don't buy it. Like with the Old Testament, I have questions. And then you realize that these churches, it's not okay to have questions. And then they're very quick to want to beat you over the head with damnation. And that's where you start to realize that Protestants aren't really about salvation by faith alone. Protestants will very quickly, that's heretical, you're going to burn in hell, but I have faith in Jesus Christ. And then Orthodox and Catholics, mainly Orthodox, I've always heard Orthodox boast up, we follow the real teachings of Jesus Christ. But then I feel like the Catholics and Orthodox are way more judgmental than Protestants. Honestly, they're both incredibly judgmental, and I just started realizing wow, I think a lot of these people don't even know how to follow the teachings of Jesus Christ, because you find so many people that don't seem to remember that Jesus really did teach the golden rule. There's a whole movement of Christianity. Jesus didn't teach love. That's a lie. Everybody's teaching that, the loving Jesus, Jesus taught love. That's not what it's about. That's like a Pastor Anderson sermon. It's no, Jesus taught to love yourself, or to love others like you love yourself, or treat others the way you want to be treated. And when Jesus said, you have heard it said that you should love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I tell you that you must love your enemy. He changed the law. You've heard it said in the law to love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I tell you, instead of what the Old Testament tells you, and this is what I'm saying in my manifesto, Jesus changed the law. And I'm basically just agreeing with Jews. Well, if he's not the Jewish Messiah, then what is he? He's some sort of an infiltrator. He's someone who came to be an enemy of Judaism, to destroy Judaism. Jesus came to earth to destroy Judaism. The Messiah, the Jewish Messiah, was supposed to gather the Jews. Jesus scattered them. He was supposed to rebuild the temple. Jesus destroyed the temple. So it kind of seems to me like he's not the Jewish Messiah. And it definitely seems to Jews like they're not the Jewish Messiah. And just trying to level with, I mean, Jews are pretty intelligent. Jews know the Torah. Jews know their holy book. Have you ever watched a video like why Jesus isn't the Jewish Messiah from a Jewish source? Like, it's Christians versus Jews. Is Jesus the Jewish Messiah? Because people will try to be like, bro, you used to be really consistent, you used to be theological, and now you're talking about your feelings, and now you're believing in the Gnostic Gospels, which not necessarily, I think people should read the Gnostic Gospels. Some of them are pretty intriguing, but bro, like, you're throwing everything out the window, and now, like, you don't have a good argument, and you would never debate anybody now. You used to, like, be willing to debate theology with people. Now, like, you have this weird view that's not backed up by anything. It is backed up by something theological. The Jewish arguments for Jesus not being the Jewish Messiah. And what Christians are saying is that, like, oh, well, when Jesus comes again, he's going to fulfill all the stuff that he didn't fulfill yet. Trust me, bro. I feel like Jews win the debate. Like, yeah, Jesus isn't the Messiah of whatever that thing was that killed all the babies in Egypt and murdered the 20,000 Jews in the desert and flooded the entire world. I guess that thing was some sort of a fucking monster alien, and when the Jewish Messiah does come, it's going to be the Antichrist. And that's what a lot of Christians say is like, oh yeah, what the Jews think is going to be the real Messiah will be the Antichrist. Well, maybe the real Jewish Messiah is the Antichrist. So, and yeah, I don't know. It's speculation. Did I hear an alarm go off while I was making this? No, the alarm's going off in 1 minute and 45 seconds. So my beans are done and it's time to eat my burrito. I don't know. I have faith in Jesus Christ. I believe that I am not going to suffer eternal conscious torment. I believe that thinking that it's a possibility for you to suffer that kind of eternal conscious torment does harm to you. It causes your life to be led by fear. And if I was going to continue this video, it would lead into a number of what could be considered occult, maybe new agey aspects of fear versus love. It's like when you're living your life in fear like that, it's not good for you. It seems like it's a system that's meant to control people, and the people are like, oh, but the West is so much better than everywhere else, and it shows that Christianity is true. Well, now we live in a time where the 1%, the elite, they have amassed so much wealth and so much money, and they rule with such a totalitarian iron fist, and that's what Christianity led to. And now you have Zionists who believe that Israel is the biblical Israel, and they're fucking genociding children, and like people are getting their legal immigration status revoked just for questioning Israel, and we might be on the verge of some sort of a dictatorship where you're not even allowed to question Israel at all. And it's like, look, I looked at the numbers recently. 1,200 Israelis died when there was that last attack from Hamas in October 2024. And I think the death toll has got to be over 50,000 by now. Last time I checked, the death toll for Palestinians was like 48,000, and it's probably well above 50,000 at this point. 50,000 Palestinians dead, 1,200 Israelis dead. It's fucking genocide, dude. And then there's all these like nutty Protestant Baptist churches. Well, that's the Holy Land, and that's God's chosen people. How are they God's chosen? Like the Talmud says that Jesus is boiling an excrement. Like, well, it's okay because they're God's chosen people and they're all going to have a mass conversion. Trust me, bro. It's all falling apart for me. And I studied theology heavily and philosophy heavily. Hold on, let me turn these beans off real quick. So whatever it is that I'm on the verge of believing, whatever my beliefs are heading towards, it's for real. Like, I'm really here for real. And I have good reasons for believing what I believe, and I get it. It's like, well, there's no church for me, but I kind of feel like all churches are corrupt. And, you know, and this thing's like, oh, this guy's a Fed, this guy's a Fed, this guy's a Fed. I think every single Christian platform on YouTube is a Fed. Kind of seems like Christians are the Feds. Like, from what I can tell, like, it just seems like all of the Christian influence, it kind of seems like the Feds want you to be a Christian. And I kind of think, like, yeah, there is a satanic elite in the occult, but I think they're playing like a Hegelian dialectic with the Christian establishment elite. And I don't want to make it seem like I think highly of myself and my own intellect, but I think I'm kind of stumbling on a high truth beyond everything. It's like, wow, Jesus... What I think Jesus meant by the straight and narrow path is not being a narcissist. Like when Jesus said, above all, treat others the way you want to be treated, for you'll know people by their fruits. For not everybody who says to me, Lord, Lord, will be saved. So who are the Christians who will not be saved? I think it's narcissistic Christians. So Jesus does talk about some sort of a hell. It gets very complicated. It gets very complicated when it comes to why do you believe what you believe about Jesus. It seems flimsy. Like Jesus talks about hell. The Old Testament talks about hell. Sometimes I think that Jesus really was like some sort of a subverter. Like he was the real God and he came to sow these subtle seeds to just kind of manipulate people away from this very dark Jewish system. So, and then people are like, that's evil, you're the most evil, wicked. You know what I think is evil, bro? Is like killing people and hurting people and harming people. No, it's also evil to not accept the Old Testament God who drowned everybody. It's like, but that's just a story from a really old book, man. I don't know if that's true. Well, you have to believe it's true or else you get tortured for all eternity. Well, if it's a lie, that's really fucking convenient, isn't it? Sorry, guys. And you know what's crazy? Like, all the years when I was like a regular Christian of some sort, they fucking sucked. All those years were the worst years of my life. 2018 till I left Kodiak. That was the craziest fucking time of my entire life, dude. And I don't want to blame God, but sometimes I think things are getting better because I'm closer to God than I've ever been. And I don't want to lead people into damnation. I don't want to lead people astray. I don't want to be a bad false teacher. But what Jesus taught is, above all, I say treat others the way you want to be treated. It's about forgiving people. Not judging people. Not being a narcissist. Basically the opposite of what Pastor Anderson teaches, bro. Like, just be nice to people. Like, maybe you're wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about theology, but at least I'm not, like, harming anybody. At least I'm not damaging anybody or traumatizing anybody or causing horrible damage. I think about the effect that bullying has. I think about, man, like, you know, people say I'm sensitive and I think too much, and there's some reality to that, but when people were, like, fucked up to me when I was growing up, when people made fun of my hair, when people made fun of my height, that fucked me up, dude. When women, like, tried to make me feel bad, like I'm not good enough, that fucked me up. That's not good. It's not good to treat people that way. Jesus tells people not to treat people that way, and when people are acting like that, because there's this really tall guy at the Baptist church who was making fun of my height, telling me I'm small. It's like, I think that's what you're not supposed to do. And you know, men give each other shit and have fun. I don't want it to be like no fun allowed, but there's like, where's it coming from? Like, are you bantering and having fun, or are you actually like kind of jealous and you're actually like kind of trying to take a dig, or like you're threatened by me and you're trying to like bring me down? There's a difference, and I've acknowledged the difference. And when I was talking about my buddy who recently died, it's like, you know, he gave me shit, but he was actually my friend. And sometimes people in Kodiak are like, dude, you take things too personally. People were just trying to give you shit. You're just like, no, they weren't. No, they fucking weren't, bro. Some people didn't like me. Some people wanted to knock me down a peg, and it was not coming from a friendly place, and it's not up for discussion. Like, I know the difference. You can fucking act like I don't. You can try to gaslight me or write me off. I don't fucking care, dude. I know the difference, and there's a difference. And so I'm up in the air, and I just believe something in the realm of Christ. Sometimes I meditate, sometimes I do breath work. I've slowly come to all these things where it's like, you know, people say, oh, you know, if you do void meditation, you could get possessed by a demon. Bro, you could get possessed by a demon doing a lot of things that Christians do. Like, people just kind of cherry pick stuff because they're uncomfortable with certain things. But I actually feel like, because I used to say, yeah, do meditation, but not void meditation, because you could get possessed by a demon. Void meditation is like trying to just rid all things of the world out of your mind, man, and just try to just be empty. And yeah, potentially something could try to fuck with you. But you know what really brings demons into your life, according to Catholic theology? Sinning. It's not a sin to think about nothing. Maybe when you're sitting in your silence trying to clear your mind, something could try to fuck with you. But you know what? Things have tried to fuck with me when I was just sleeping. I wake up in the middle of the night and I see something messed up. So that doesn't check out. Like, you can do void meditation. I think you should try to do, if you're going to meditate, that's what's beneficial, is just trying to clear your mind. Trying to clear your mind. And, you know, maybe a demon could try to fuck with you, or maybe you could get some insight, or maybe you could feel some peace from this world for a little bit. So I could just go on and 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 on, guys. I think for now, this is what I wanted to say in this video. It's very long. Maybe I should release it in 2 parts, or maybe you should just watch it in 2 parts. It just is what it is. I gotta go eat my bean burrito now, and hopefully go to bed, because it's 3 in the morning. God bless you, friends, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.